In this video, we'll annotate a Java class. So just as a checkpoint with our Hibernate development process, our to-do list, in the previous video, we covered the Hibernate configuration file and how to add it to our project. Now in this video, we're going to focus on annotating the Java class. So as far as terminology, Hibernate has this concept of an entity class. So what's an entity? Well, it's really just a fancy name for a Java class that is mapped to a database table. And it's really just a plain old Java class with fields and getters and setter methods. And then you simply add annotations on it to help with mapping it to a database table. So you'll hear the term thrown around, entity class, but think of it just as a regular old Java class or a POJO with special annotations on it. So here's the diagram here with the object to relational mapping, or ORM. So on the far left, we have a Java class for a student, and it has fields for the ID, first name, last name, and email. And we want to take this class and we want to map it to a database table over on the far right. So we have this database table called student, and it has an ID, first underscore name, last underscore name, and also an email address. So we somehow need to tell Hibernate how to map this class to the actual table and also how to map fields to the actual columns. And that's where we come into the whole mapping aspect of it. Now, just to let you know, there's two options for mapping a class. Option one is the XML config file. I want to say this is more of a legacy approach. This was used heavily when Hibernate first came out. However, there's also the option two, using Java annotations. And so this is the more modern approach, the preferred approach. So in this tutorial series, I'm only going to show you how to do option two, Java annotations. If you want information on the old school legacy approach, just go search the internet. There's plenty of old examples out there to show you how to do it the long way, but I'm going to show you the modern preferred way of using Java annotations. All right, so how do we do annotations? Well, here, the first step is that we need to map the class to a given database table. Then in step two, we'll map the fields to database columns. And I'll show you how to do this step by step in the following slides. All right, so let's start with step one, mapping a class to a database table. So over on the far left, you see our public class student. This is a regular old Java class, but notice the first two lines. We're going to add what they call annotations. So in Java, an annotation has an @ symbol and the name of that annotation. So in this case, we're actually going to have two annotations. The first one is @entity, just to let them know that this is an entity that we're going to map to a database table. And then the second item is @table. We give the actual name of the database table we're mapping this class to. Now, in this example, the @table name equals student is actually optional because in our case, the Java class name has the same name as the database table. But just for completeness, I always like to give the explicit name here just so we know exactly what we're mapping to. So that's the piece there. We set up @entity and @table, and we're mapping this class to a given table. So that covers step one. All right, so now moving ahead to step two, this is where we're going to map the fields to database columns. All right, so we have our class student. It has two fields. It has a int ID and a first name. So for the ID is actually the primary key for our class. So kind of think of a student as having a student ID or something. It's a unique number, so it's the primary key. So here we make use of @ID. So that signifies that this is a primary key for this class. And then we have @column, and then we give name equals ID. So I'm going to specify that this field called ID maps to a database column called ID. Now, the column name for the database could be actually different. It could be student underscore ID or social security number or, I don't know, unique ID or something. So here you give the actual name of the field and at column, you give the actual name of the column. No requirement for those two to be the same. They can be different if you'd like. And now, as a good example of this, moving down to first name, we have our field called first name, but then this maps to a column named first underscore name. So note the difference here. In the Java world, we use first with a capital N name, camel case, and then in the database, they have first underscore name. So again, in the database, it could be anything. It could be the student first name or whatever. You simply give the actual column name that you're mapping to. So again, there's no requirement to have a one-to-one as far as the actual naming convention. You can give any name that you want for the field. You can give any name that you want for the database table. Now, as an aside, if the actual field name and the column names are exactly the same, then there's no need to actually specify the @column attribute. Hibernate will automatically pick that up. But again, I like to be explicit. I like to be clear. And I just like to go the extra step to signify that, hey, I'm mapping this field to a given database column, because I don't like any magic in the backgrounds. All right, so that's basically it. So we did step 1 of mapping the class to a database table, and then we covered step 2 here of mapping the fields to specific database columns. And you kind of repeat the process for all the additional columns that you'll have for an entity. All right, so this is kind of the theory. What we're going to do in the next video is that we're actually going to move into Eclipse, and then we'll actually start writing code, and we'll make this happen so you can see how all of the mechanics work out in Eclipse. All right, so I will see you in the next video. Yo.